As many of you are familiar, academia has a strong hierarchical structure. This creates dependencies that increases the chances of having incidents that involves power abuse. Abuse of power can take place in various forms, one of which is sexual harassment. We're now going to explain the dependency structure in academia, how those create the underlying conditions for the exertion of power, and its impact on the mental health of young researchers.
Yeah, so I think so important to understand sexual harassment within academia. It is really to go a bit back and think of academia and its structure. So the way academia is organized is with its very hierarchical structures and positions, right? In which there's an extremely high dependency between different people. And this is different from a regular, the private sector or any other organization, because you wouldn't really leave your PhD halfway, or it's very hard to quit in a situation like that. And if you, because you're dependent to get the title, you need to get the title. Now you've been there for 2 years or 3 years, you're not gonna just give up. Usually that's what you think, and also it's really your baby. You wouldn't really leave it. So there is an extreme dependency to your supervisors, and in this case, it was a postdoc and the group leader, right? That you need not only to get the title, to also get a good working, so that your work functions somehow, you can do your work, but also to get a future job. So it's extremely strong dependencies that perhaps only exists in healthcare, like within medicine, for example. That's just the only comparable of the structure. And also the hierarchy, the strong hierarchy is the only others that are higher than academia is military, actually. So this is also compared in some studies. So it's at that level in terms of our society where academia lies. And then it's also, so these dependencies are, it's somehow the way that academia works. It's through these dependencies. And when someone is extremely dependent of the other, it will tolerate a lot of abuse, actually, or some abuse, because it needs this person for the next step, for whatever it is, for the title, for the career, for whatever it is. So you somehow, by creating and deepening this dependency, you allow for this power imbalance to be even further away, and have and exert that power and feel the, I don't know, this power to yourself, and even be able to ask for more things, for more work, for more more working hours, less vacation, all of these things.
This reminded me of a story that I experienced. I mean, it might apply to some sort of like immigrants who come to Europe to work, as I was one of them in the past. And obviously I had to get a work permit to be able to work here, and I was 100% dependent on the company that I used to work, which I didn't experience this problem, but I experienced some other issues along the way when things went, let's say, a bit down south, that I was reminded, hey, look, be careful, kind of thing. And you feel completely vulnerable, because what is your option, right? I mean, you don't have like an ample amount of opportunities that you can just pick from. You're kind of dependent on this institute, this organization, to keep you here, because that's your goal, that's your life goal, personal goal. So it leads to a lot of pressure and makes you do things that you might not do in a normal situation. So it's not the same level, it's not the same extent, but I still understand the feeling, the frustration it might create from time to time. So
yeah, absolutely. If I may add, this is also a trend that is not, so I don't have any data for this. I usually try to see if there's any paper showing it, but actually I don't know of this. But there's something we've seen in the fields, which in academia, which is that people normally that needs the supervisors for the visa they are typically more harassed, and that's extremely sad to think of it like this, because it's just that they are more dependent, they are more they just need the visa, so they will do more, they will work more, they will have less, ask for less conditions, and they are typically paid less even sometimes in Germany. It's quite shocking to be next to someone. And then we talk about diversity and minorities and discrimination, and that's when, to me, it gets into a more illegal sphere, actually, because then it would fit into discrimination of these individuals, actually.
Another thing that you wrote, and I wanted to ask you, which is similar to the first question that I asked you, is so sexual harassment is an abuse of power, and that it wasn't isolated but systemic. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, it goes really in this direction, that it's a manifestation of a culture, of the system that creates the conditions that make it very, very easy to exert this sort of behavior. So besides the dependencies in the hierarchy, I can also add that it's a culture, or academic culture is very individual based. So it's like each man for itself almost. And there's very few occurrences that it's really team focused, and the well-being of a team is the value. Actually, this is typically not like this. So usually the value is on the individual, on the genius, on the, what you can create on your own, and what you can do. And this makes the level the whole culture very competitive, and that together with the dependencies is just a boiling pot where there's a conflicts of interest very easily done, and you don't really have the same goals. It's very easy for a supervisor and or even a postdoc and a PhD student that is supervised to not agree on what should be done, and then because there's a power differential, then this kind of things can happen. So yeah, it's just like the culture, and it's a system pushes everyone to commit this sort of behavior. So I don't think it's very useful to think of sexual harassment and power abuse as isolated events, and to think of, oh, these are a few bad apples that we can just fire, or we can essentially just we just let them retire and take all. So it's a bit more sneaky and toxic. It's present all around, and also, even if you didn't feel it yourself, like I was lucky enough to be in a group that I didn't have this problem, but just seeing this next to me in another group still creates this environment and the culture. I still feel it, so that's for sure impactful for the whole atmosphere and working culture. So it's just keeps on repeating.
How does this impact the mental health of such young, early stage researchers or PhD students? Like you said, even though it doesn't happen to you, if you see that it happens to someone you still get affected. It's like a psychological thing. And what would you say about that? And the reason why I'm asking is because I see a lot of online and on Twitter and everything, a lot of PhD students, young researchers are struggling with these issues, anxiety and mental health, all the pressure coming from, finishing on time, getting cited and things like that. And on top, if you have this issue, how does that impact the mental health of this group?
Typically, it's part of the definition of power abuse that it affects the victim. So in order to be considered abuse of power, it needs to influence and impact the victim's dignity as well as work motivation. And in the end, if it's repeated, it will create mental health issues such as anxiety and depression and PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. That's actually the biggest impact mental health-wise. And for this, there's actually some data. Well, it's a correlation only, but I think this is still important to show, and that it wasn't from a survey from all the PhD students in Germany, that they really show that in groups that they felt more, or they said that they were being bullied, it's also the same people that have a high score of depression as well as anxiety. And this you can even see if they have you been bullied, once, twice, every week, you could really see, and there was really a correlation for together with how anxious and depressed this person was. And PTSD is also one of the important consequences, as well as even it goes even towards suicidal ideation. Actually, this is also known. So it could lead to quite some problematic situations that we really want to avoid. And this is even, at the expense, it's probably not just one single individual, as you said. So it's really at the expense of normally the entire working group productivity and well-being. So all these things are connected, of course, if the culture is like that.
Just a follow-up question out of curiosity, it might sound naive, but is it because, like you said, there has to be the right time for the person to report this? Like that person should not be pushed or anything. Is it because they relive the incident, or is there any other reason for that?
Yeah, no, they relive the incident.
Okay.
That's okay. Very clear. And so they will always relive the incident. So it's just a little bit easier if you already come from a more solid point that you don't feel guilty about it, because typically this is the thoughts and the emotions that it drives. Like every time that you're going to talk about it, it almost feels like how it felt at that point. You feel humiliated, you feel like you somehow had it coming. This is the typical, somehow you feel that you're guilty of something, that you deserve it, and which is really not true, and nothing of that sort should have happened to you, obviously. So, but this is what typically the victims report in that moment, is that it feels like they did something wrong, and they will just leave that over and over again. So they have to be, or it would be much more helpful for them and for the other ones, if they take care of themselves first, if they put themselves, okay, I need to take care of myself, and take time off, go to therapy, and also be in sick leave if you need, and
In the next and the last video, we're going to explain what you can do to fight the abuse of power in academia on an institutional and personal level.